Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a very serious, very uncomfortable conversation about the state of our republic tonight, because what I am about to lay out for you isn't just another headline from the Beltway rumor mill or some petty partisan squabble over tax rates. We are looking at something far more sinister, something that gnaws at the very foundation of this nation's survival. And if you are not angry yet, you're not paying attention. We have watched for years as the radical left has infiltrated our schools, our corporations, and our media, but there was always one line we thought they wouldn't dare cross, one sacred institution that stood apart from the rot of woke ideology and political weaponization, and that is the United States military. But folks, the mask has finally slipped off, and what we are seeing underneath is ugly, it is dangerous, and quite frankly, it smells like treason. We have a situation unfolding right now that should send shivers down the spine of every veteran who ever signed that blank check to Uncle Sam, and every citizen who sleeps soundly at night believing that our armed forces answer to the Constitution, not to the whims of a rogue political party. We are talking about open calls for mutiny. We are talking about sedition coming from the highest levels of the United States Senate. And we are talking about a breakdown of the chain of command that turns us from a superpower into a banana republic overnight. The mainstream media, of course, they want to bury this. They want to tell you it's just rhetoric. They want to gaslight you into thinking that encouraging soldiers to disobey orders is some kind of noble resistance, but we know better. We know that in the military, orders are not suggestions, and the chain of command is not a multiple choice question on a college exam. Enter Karoline Leavitt, a woman who apparently has more courage in her little finger than half the GOP establishment has in their entire bodies, because she stepped into the arena and called this exactly what it is. She didn't mince words. She didn't hide behind legal jargon. She pointed a finger directly at Senator Mark Kelly and a cabal of Democrat lawmakers and accused them of inciting a revolt within our armed forces. Let that sink in for a second. We are not talking about a disagreement on foreign policy. We are talking about elected officials, people who swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution, actively telling our men and women in uniform to ignore their superiors and take matters into their own hands. If that isn't the definition of playing with fire, I don't know what is. Mark Kelly, let's talk about him for a moment, because this is where the betrayal cuts the deepest. This man isn't some career bureaucrat who's never held anything heavier than a pen. He's a retired Navy captain, he's an astronaut, he's a guy who wore the flight suit and looked the American people in the eye. He knows the uniform code of military justice better than almost anyone in that Senate chamber. He knows exactly what Article 94 says about mutiny and sedition, and he knows exactly what happens to a unit when discipline breaks down. For a man with his resume to turn around and encourage insubordination, to use his platform to sow discord in the ranks, is not just irresponsible, it is a dereliction of duty that stains every honor he ever received. When you put on that uniform, you accept a code, a way of life that demands total submission to lawful authority, and that obligation doesn't just evaporate because you traded your fatigues for a tailored suit and a Senate pin. Karoline Leavitt understood the gravity of this when she launched her offensive, and she rightly pointed out that under military law, a retired officer is still subject to the UCMJ. This is a critical point that the liberal pundits are conveniently forgetting or deliberately ignoring. They want you to think Mark Kelly is just a private citizen exercising free speech, but that is a lie. When you retire from the military, especially as an officer, you carry that commission for life. You are part of the reserve of leadership that this country relies on, and you are held to a higher standard than the guy working at the coffee shop. You cannot incite a mutiny on Monday and hide behind the First Amendment on Tuesday. Leavitt's argument isn't just political red meat. It is grounded in the black and white letter of the law, and that is why the left is panicking. They are panicking because someone finally had the guts to say that the rules apply to them too. For too long, we have watched the Democrat elite act like they are above the law, like they can leak classified information, wipe servers, manufacture dossiers, and weaponize the intelligence agencies without consequence. Now, they think they can hijack the military. They think they can turn our soldiers into social justice warriors who pick and choose which orders align with their feelings. Karoline Leavitt is standing in the breach and shouting enough. She is demanding an internal investigation, she is demanding accountability, and she is exposing a rot that goes deep into the heart of the modern Democrat Party. This isn't about one senator. This is about a coordinated effort to break the military's loyalty to the commander-in-chief and transfer it to the party apparatus. Think about the implications of what Leavitt is exposing here. If a senator can tell a general or a colonel or a private to ignore orders and gets away with it, we no longer have a military, we have an armed mob. We have armed factions loyal to political ideologies rather than the Constitution. That is how civil wars start, folks. That is how nations collapse. When you look at the footage, when you look at the transcripts of these hearings that Leavitt is highlighting, you see the arrogance of these people. They truly believe they know better than the chain of command. They believe their moral superiority gives them the right to dismantle the hierarchy that has kept this nation safe for 2.5 centuries. It is the height of narcissism, and it is a direct threat to national security. The media calls Leavitt divisive, they call her aggressive. But let me tell you something, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. She is fighting for the soul of the military. She is fighting for the young kid from Kansas who signed up to protect his country, not to be a pawn in Mark Kelly's political games. That kid needs to know that when an order comes down, it is lawful and it must be obeyed, otherwise, he gets killed. It is that simple. War is not a debating society. The battlefield is not a university safe space. Hesitation gets people killed. Division gets people killed. And what Mark Kelly and his cohorts are doing is injecting hesitation and division directly into the veins of our armed forces. Leavitt's push for a formal reprimand and a full investigation is the bare minimum of what should happen. In a sane world, in a world where the rule of law actually meant something, Mark Kelly would be facing a court-martial. I know that sounds extreme to some of you, but read the code. Read what it says about officers who incite disloyalty. If a sergeant did what Senator Kelly did, he would be in the brig before sunset. Why is there a different set of rules for the ruling class? Why do they get a pass? Because they have a D next to their name? Because the media protects them? Karoline Leavitt is smashing that double standard with a sledgehammer, and that is why they hate her. That is why they will attack her character. That is why they will try to silence her, because she is threatening their power to manipulate the one institution that can actually stop them. This brings us to the broader context of what is happening to our military under this liberal influence. We have seen the recruitment numbers tanking, we have seen the focus shift from lethality to diversity, and now we are seeing the encouragement of insubordination. It is all connected. It is a systematic dismantling of American strength. They want a military that is weak, woke, and loyal only to the deep state. Mark Kelly is just the face of this particular operation. He is the trusted insider, the moderate hero, used to sell a radical agenda. It's a Trojan horse strategy. They use a man with a chest full of medals to tell the troops that it's okay to rebel, that it's actually patriotic to disobey, twisting the very meaning of the word until it breaks. But let's look at the evidence Leavitt brought to the table. We are talking about video evidence, transcripts from hearings where the intent is undeniable. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was a calculated message sent to the ranks. Do not comply. That is the message. In the civilian world, civil disobedience has a place. In the military, it is a cancer. Leavitt knows this. She understands that you cannot have a functioning defense apparatus if the lower ranks are constantly second-guessing the strategic decisions based on political signaling from Capitol Hill. The investigation she triggered is peeling back the layers of this onion, and what we are finding is that this sentiment is not isolated. It is festering in the cocktail parties of DC, where these elites convince themselves that they are saving the country by destroying its safeguards. The sheer audacity of Mark Kelly to stand there, having taken the oath twice, once as an officer and once as a senator, and effectively spit on both of them, is breathtaking. And remember, he did this while the world is on fire. We have adversaries in Beijing, in Moscow, in Tehran, watching us. They are watching our senators tell our soldiers to stand down or rise up against their leadership. Do you think China is tolerating mutiny in the PLA? Do you think Putin allows his officers to debate orders? No. They are laughing at us. They look at this chaos, this internal sabotage, and they see weakness. Karoline Leavitt is the one pointing at the horizon and saying, The storm is coming, and we are scuttling our own ship. We have to support this investigation. We have to back Leavitt, not just because she's a Republican, but because she is right. The timeline of events clearly shows a pattern. Kelly didn't just wake up one morning and decide to go rogue. This is part of a narrative being pushed by the left that says any authority they don't control is illegitimate. If they control the White House, the orders are sacred. If they don't, resistance is mandatory. It is situational ethics applied to national survival, and it is a suicide pact. Leavitt's demand for accountability is an attempt to restore the guardrails. She is saying that the UCMJ is not optional. It applies to the private, it applies to the general, and it applies to the retired captain sitting in the Senate. When the news broke about the formal reprimand, the liberal media tried to spin it as a political hit job. They tried to make Kelly the victim. Oh, look at how the MAGA Republicans are attacking an American hero. Give me a break. Being a hero in the past does not give you a free pass to burn down the house in the present. Benedict Arnold was a hero at the Battle of Saratoga before he was a traitor at West Point. Past performance is not a guarantee of future loyalty. We judge men by their actions today, and Mark Kelly's actions were those of a man who values his party's power grab over the stability of the United States Armed Forces. Leavitt cut through that sentimental fog and focused on the facts. You called for disobedience. That is a crime. Period. The implications of this investigation are massive. If it gains traction, if the American people really understand what happened here, it could shatter the illusion of moral superiority that the Democrats cling to. They love to wrap themselves in the flag when it suits them, but the moment the flag stands in the way of their agenda, they are ready to unravel it thread by thread. Leavitt exposed that hypocrisy. She showed us that for the left, power is the only God, and they will sacrifice discipline, tradition, and safety to get it. This is why the establishment is so terrified of this story. It's not just about a reprimand. It's about exposing the mindset of the modern Democrat Party regarding the military. They view the military not as a protector of the nation, but as a potential threat to their control that needs to be neutralized or co-opted. As we move forward in this hour, we are going to break down exactly what the Uniform Code of Military Justice says, word for word. We are going to look at the precedents. We are going to look at what happened to other officers who dared to utter a fraction of what Kelly said. And you will see, clearly and undeniably, that there is a two-tiered justice system in this country, and Karoline Leavitt is currently the only one trying to unify it again under the banner of truth. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you want a military that fights wars and wins, or do you want a military that holds struggle sessions and debates orders based on the political winds blowing from the Senate cloakroom? Because that is the choice. We are watching a battle for the soul of the officer corps. On one side, you have the traditionalists, the patriots, represented by the stance Leavitt is taking, upholding the law, maintaining order. On the other side, you have the disruptors, the political operatives in uniform, represented by Kelly's actions, chaos, insubordination, and political expediency. It is a clash of worldviews. One leads to strength, the other leads to defeat. And let's be honest, a defeated America is exactly what the globalists want. They want us humbled. They want us broken from within so they can pick over the pieces. That is why this story matters. That is why we cannot let it fade into the 24-hour news cycle. Karoline Leavitt didn't just file a complaint. She fired a warning shot across the bow of the deep state. She told them, "We see you. We hear you. And we are coming for you." And that, my friends, is why we love her. She is fighting a war on a battlefield most people didn't even know existed until she lit a flare and showed us the enemy positions. The enemy is inside the wire. The call is coming from inside the house. And it's time we answered it with the full force of the law. Let's take a walk down a hypothetical road for a moment, shall we? I want you to picture a 19-year-old Lance Corporal stationed at Camp Lejeune. Let's call him Corporal Smith. Good kid, loves his country, follows orders. Now, Imagine Corporal Smith goes on TikTok or Instagram Live in his uniform and tells his platoon that they shouldn't listen to the president's orders because he thinks the administration is corrupt. Imagine he tells his fellow Marines to disregard the chain of command because of his personal political feelings. What happens to Corporal Smith? I don't need to tell you, because you already know. The military police would be at his door before he could hit end stream. He would be stripped of his rank, thrown in the brig, dishonorably discharged, and his life would be ruined. He would be made an example of, to ensure that discipline is maintained. Now look at Senator Mark Kelly. Same uniform in his closet. Same oath in his history. But instead of a TikTok video, he uses the Senate floor and national television. Instead of a platoon, he is broadcasting to the entire armed forces. And what is the reaction from the establishment? Crickets. Absolute silence. Or worse, applause. This is the definition of a two-tiered justice system. It is a system where the laws are spiderwebs for the rich and powerful. They walk right through them, but they are steel chains for you and me, and for that kid at Camp Lejeune. Karoline Leavitt is the only one screaming about this disparity, and she is forcing us to look at the ugly truth. In Joe Biden's America, political affiliation is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. To truly understand the severity of what Leavitt is charging Kelly with, we have to get into the weeds of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or the UCMJ. This isn't civilian law, this is blood and guts law. Specifically, we need to look at Article 88 and Article 94. Article 88 prohibits commissioned officers from using contemptuous words against the President, the Vice President, or Congress. Now, the left will scream free speech, but the Supreme Court has long held that the military is a specialized society separate from civilian life. When you accept the commission, you accept limits on your speech to preserve order. Kelly knows this. He lived by these rules for decades. For him to turn around and spew contemptuous rhetoric that undermines the commander-in-chief isn't just rude. It's a violation of the very code he swore to uphold. But Leavitt goes further, and this is where it gets terrifying. She invokes the concept of mutiny and sedition under Article 94. Mutiny isn't just taking over a ship like in the movies. It includes acting with intent to usurp or override lawful military authority. When a senator, who is also a retired captain, signals to the troops that the civilian leadership is illegitimate or that their orders should be questioned, he is flirting with sedition. He is creating a permission structure for chaos. Leavitt's legal team has looked at this, and they argue that Kelly's status as a retiree receiving a pension means he is still subject to court-martial. This is the golden leash. You take the check, you follow the rules. You don't get to have it both ways. You don't get the prestige of the title and the freedom of a radical activist. Think about the precedent this sets if Kelly walks away unscathed. It sends a message to every retired general and admiral that they can become political warlords. We are already seeing the politicization of the brass. We saw it with those letters signed by 50 intelligence officials lying about Hunter Biden's laptop. Now we are seeing it with open calls for defiance. If we normalize this, we are heading towards a scenario where the military becomes a fractured entity, with factions loyal to specific generals or parties rather than the Constitution. That is the hallmark of a failing state. That is what happens in third world dictatorships, not the United States of America. Karoline Leavitt is trying to pull us back from that ledge. And where is the comparison to General Michael Flynn in all of this? I want you to really think about that. General Flynn, a man who served this country with distinction for 30 years, was hunted down, ruined, and bankrupt by the Department of Justice for a phone call. A phone call he was authorized to make during a transition period. They destroyed him because he threatened their power. They used the Logan Act, a law that had never been used, to go after him. Yet here we have Mark Kelly, openly undermining military discipline, and the same DOJ, the same media that crucified Flynn, is treating Kelly like a saint. The hypocrisy is so thick you can cut it with a knife. It proves that this was never about national security or the rule of law. It was always about protecting the swamp creatures and destroying the outsiders. Leavitt's demand for an internal investigation is a strategic masterstroke because it forces the Pentagon to go on the record. It forces the current military leadership to either condemn Kelly and uphold the UCMJ, or defend him and expose themselves as political hacks. It's a trap. If they defend him, they lose the trust of the rank and file who know the rules. If they condemn him, they anger their political masters in the White House. Leavitt has put them in a box, and she is tightening the screws. She is exposing the fact that the Pentagon leadership has become more concerned with diversity, equity, and inclusion and political favor than with warfighting capability and discipline. The media's role in this cover-up cannot be overstated. Turn on CNN. Turn on MSNBC. Are they talking about Article 94? Are they talking about the dangers of inciting mutiny? No. They are talking about Karoline Leavitt's tone. They are talking about how divisive the Republicans are. They are framing the accuser as the villain. This is the classic Davo tactic: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. They are trying to gaslight the American public into believing that demanding military discipline is somehow an attack on democracy. It is Orwellian. Up is down, war is peace, and mutiny is patriotism. But the American people aren't buying it anymore. We have seen too much. We saw the Afghanistan withdrawal. We saw the lies about the border. We know when we are being lied to. Let's dig deeper into the psychology of Mark Kelly and his Democrat cohorts. Why do they feel comfortable doing this? It's because they fundamentally do not respect the military as an institution. To them, the military is just another government agency to be socialized. They don't understand the sacred bond of the chain of command because they have never respected authority that didn't come from their own ideology. They believe their moral righteousness, their woke agenda, supersedes the UCMJ. They believe that if an order conflicts with their social justice goals, it is not only their right but their duty to disobey it. This is a poison pill for any armed force. You cannot run an army on feelings. You run it on orders. Karoline Leavitt is channeling the frustration of millions of veterans who are watching their beloved institution crumble. She is speaking for the guys at the VFW hall who shake their heads when they see what's happening. She is speaking for the active duty soldiers who are afraid to speak up because they'll be labeled extremists by their own government. This isn't just a political stunt. It is a rescue mission. She is trying to rescue the honor of the military from the clutches of politicians who would use it as a throwaway toy. And the fact that a young press secretary has to lead this charge, while the establishment Republicans sit on their hands, tells you everything you need to know about the state of the GOP. We need to support Leavitt because she is taking the arrows for us. Every time she goes on TV and brings up Kelly's violation, she is attacked. She is mocked. But she stands her ground. She stands there with the transcript in one hand and the UCMJ in the other, and she dares them to prove her wrong. And they can't. They can't prove her wrong on the facts, so they attack her personally. That is the tell. When the other side resorts to ad hominem attacks, it means you have won the argument. Leavitt has won the argument. Mark Kelly is guilty of violating the code he swore to protect. The only question remaining is whether there is anyone left in Washington with the spine to enforce the penalty. Consider the timing of all this. Why now? Why is the left pushing for military disobedience now? Could it be that they fear the upcoming elections? Could it be that they are prepositioning the military to intervene in domestic politics if things don't go their way? I know. They call us conspiracy theorists for asking these questions. But after everything we've seen, the Russia hoax, the censorship industrial complex, the lawfare against President Trump, is it really so crazy to think they would try to weaponize the military against a political resurgence of the right? They are terrified of losing power, and desperate people do desperate things. Leavitt is shining a spotlight on this before it's too late. She is screaming fire in a crowded theater because there is actually a fire. The video evidence that Leavitt presented is damning. You see Kelly, calm, cool, collected, telling the world that resistance is necessary. It's not the raving of a madman. It's the calculated instruction of a leader. That makes it more dangerous. If a crazy person shouts on a street corner, nobody listens. When a senator and astronaut speaks, people listen. He is leveraging his hero status to sell a traitorous idea. It is the ultimate betrayal of trust. He is cashing in the chips of his past service to buy credibility for his present subversion. And Karoline Leavitt is bankrupting that account. She is telling the world, look at what this man is actually saying, not what his bio says. Let's be clear about what formal reprimand means in this context. Leavitt isn't just asking for a slap on the wrist. A formal reprimand for an officer, even a retired one, is a career killer. It is a permanent stain. It is a declaration that you lacked judgment and honor. It is the first step towards stripping someone of their clearance and their standing. It is a nuclear option in the world of military officers. By pursuing this, Leavitt is signaling that we are done playing nice. We are done with the go along to get along mentality. If you break the rules to hurt our country, we will use the rules to break you. It is a new era of Republican combativeness, and Leavitt is the tip of the spear. This battle is also about the future of recruitment. Who wants to join a military that is led by people who don't believe in the chain of command? Who wants to serve under officers who are more interested in politics than victory? We are facing a recruitment crisis because traditional American families, the families that have sent their sons and daughters to fight for generations, are pulling back. They are saying, I'm not sending my kid to be indoctrinated or to be a pawn in Mark Kelly's political games. Leavitt's fight is a fight to restore confidence. If we can hold Kelly accountable, if we can show that the law still matters, maybe we can start to rebuild the trust that has been lost. But if we fail, if Mark Kelly gets away with this, then we have officially crossed the Rubicon. We have admitted that the UCMJ is dead letter law. We have admitted that the military is just an extension of the Democrat National Committee. And at that point, God help us all. Because when the external enemies come, and they are coming, they won't care about our political squabbles. They will only care that we are divided, leaderless, and undisciplined. Karoline Leavitt sees the wolves at the gate. Mark Kelly is opening the gate. That is the reality. So, as we move into the next segment of this analysis, I want to talk about the money. I want to talk about the defense contractors, the lobbyists, and the machine that protects people like Kelly. Because you don't get this kind of protection for free. There is a whole ecosystem in Washington that thrives on this corruption, and Leavitt is threatening their bottom line too. We are going to follow the money, we are going to look at the network of influence, and we are going to see why the swamp protects its own with such ferocity. Stay tuned, because we are just scratching the surface of this betrayal. The deeper we dig, the uglier it gets. And you deserve to know the whole truth. Follow the money. It is the oldest rule in the book, and it never fails. You want to know why Mark Kelly feels untouchable? You want to know why the Senate Ethics Committee isn't dragging him in for a hearing right now? It isn't just because he's a Democrat. It's because he is a golden goose for the defense industrial complex. Washington, D.C. is not a capital city. It is a business model. And the business is war, contracts, and influence peddling. Mark Kelly sits right at the intersection of all three. He is on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He is one of the gatekeepers for the hundreds of billions of dollars that flow from your paycheck into the coffers of Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing. When Karoline Leavitt stood up and pointed a finger at Kelly, she didn't just annoy a senator, she threatened a revenue stream. You see, the establishment loves a guy like Kelly. He has the hero brand that sells well on TV, but behind the scenes, he plays ball. He votes for the omnibuses. He votes for the foreign aid packages that somehow always end up buying weapons from American companies to send overseas. He is a reliable cog in the machine. Now, imagine if he gets court-martialed. Imagine if he gets reprimanded for inciting mutiny. That disrupts the flow. That makes the shareholders nervous. So, the machine protects its own. They circle the wagons around Kelly not because they love him, but because they love the stability he represents for their grift. This is why Leavitt's attack is so dangerous to them. She is pulling on a loose thread that could unravel the whole sweater. If we start applying the UCMJ to retired officers in Congress, half of the experts you see on CNN would be in handcuffs. There is an entire industry of retired generals and admirals who get on TV to push for more war, while sitting on the boards of the companies that make the bombs. It is a conflict of interest so massive it blocks out the sun, but nobody talks about it. Kelly is part of this ecosystem. His call for disobedience wasn't just political hackery. It was a signal that the Uni Party, that unholy alliance of establishment Republicans and Democrats, is more loyal to their ideology than to the stability of the country. Let's talk about that term, the Uni Party. Why aren't we hearing Mitch McConnell scream about this? Why aren't the old guard Republicans demanding Kelly's resignation? Because they are in on the joke. They go to the same cocktail parties. They share the same lobbyists. They look at Karoline Leavitt and they don't see a patriot. They see a problem. They see someone who doesn't know how things work in Washington. Well, thank God she doesn't. We didn't send her to Washington to learn how things work. We sent her to break the things that aren't working. And the cozy relationship between the oversight committees and the military brass is definitely not working. Think about the sheer arrogance of the Defense Department right now. They can't pass an audit. They can't tell you where billions of dollars went. But they have time to issue memos on extremism in the ranks, which is just code for purging conservatives. Mark Kelly is the legislative face of this arrogance. By encouraging troops to question orders, he is effectively saying that the military belongs to the bureaucracy, not the people. He is telling the soldiers, your loyalty is to the permanent state, not the temporary occupant of the White House, especially if that occupant is a Republican. This is the deep state fighting for its life. They know that if they lose control of the military, they lose their ultimate enforcement arm. Karoline Leavitt is exposing the Manchurian candidate aspect of this. I don't mean Kelly is literally brainwashed, but he has been groomed. Look at his trajectory. Astronaut. National hero. Spouse of a victim of violence. It is the perfect resume. It is designed to be bulletproof. Who attacks an astronaut? It's political suicide, right? That's what they thought. That's what they counted on. They thought they could use him to say the most radical, dangerous things and hide behind his flight suit. But they didn't count on a new generation of conservatives who don't care about your resume if you are betraying the country today. Leavitt looked past the medals and saw the mutiny. She looked past the astronaut and saw the anarchist. And what about the national security implications? While Kelly is playing these games, China is building a navy that rivals ours. Russia is on the march. Iran is enriching uranium. And our leaders are telling our troops that discipline is optional? It is madness. It is a suicide pact. The Chinese Communist Party looks at Mark Kelly and they smile. They don't need to defeat us on the battlefield. They just need to wait for us to rot from the inside. They are watching a US senator do their work for them. Every soldier who hesitates to follow an order because of what Kelly said is a victory for Beijing. Leavitt understands this. She knows that a woke, divided, insubordinate military is a paper tiger. The establishment media plays a crucial role here too. Notice how they frame the narrative. When Leavitt speaks, they use words like unfounded, bizarre, attack. When Kelly speaks, it's principled, concerned, patriotic dissent. They are manufacturing consent for mutiny. They are trying to normalize the idea that the military should be a check on the president, rather than a tool of the president. This is a fundamental rewriting of the Constitution. The Founding Fathers were terrified of a standing army that could act independently. That's why they put the civilian commander-in-chief in charge. Kelly and his media allies are trying to flip that upside down. They want a military that acts as a Praetorian Guard for the liberal world order, protecting the swamp from the voters. Leavitt's demand for an investigation is also a demand for transparency. We need to see the communications. Who told Kelly to say this? Did he come up with it on his own? Or was it a talking point handed to him by the DNC or some shady NGO? I bet my bottom dollar if you subpoenaed his emails, you'd find that this call for disobedience was a coordinated strategy. They talk about resistance in the open. Imagine what they say in private. They are likely discussing how to use the military to block deportations, how to use the military to enforce climate lockdowns, how to use the military to seize voting machines. I know it sounds dark, but look at what they have already done. Is anything off the table? This is why the formal reprimand matters. It puts a mark on his permanent record, sure, but more importantly, it forces a vote. It forces every single senator to go on record. Do you support mutiny, or do you support the chain of command? Leavitt is forcing them to show their cards. And that is why they are terrified. They want to operate in the grey area. They want to wink and nod at disobedience without owning it. Leavitt is turning on the floodlights and saying, pick a side. If you vote to protect Kelly, you are voting for anarchy. If you vote to reprimand him, you are admitting the Democrats are dangerous. It is a lose-lose for them, which is why it is a win-win for America. We have to talk about the culture of no consequences that Kelly represents. In the private sector, if you undermine the CEO and tell employees to ignore directives, you are fired for cause immediately. In the military, you are court-martialed. Only in the twisted world of Washington politics do you get a promotion and a book deal. Leavitt is bringing real-world accountability to clown-world politics. She is acting like a normal person who sees something crazy and calls it crazy. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but in 2024, sanity is a revolutionary act. And don't overlook the gender dynamic here. The left loves to preach about empowering women, right? The future is female, they scream. But the moment a strong, conservative woman like Karoline Leavitt stands up and speaks truth to power, what do? They try to destroy her. They call her a Barbie. They dismiss her intellect. They treat her with a condescension that is truly misogynistic. They are terrified of her because she represents the one thing they can't control, a woman who thinks for herself and refuses to be a victim. She is taking on a male-dominated power structure, the military-industrial complex, and she isn't blinking. That is true feminism, ladies and gentlemen. Not the pink hat-wearing hysteria, but the grit and guts to stand in the arena. Let's pivot back to the troops for a second. The E4 Mafia. The grunts. They are watching this. They have smartphones. They see the double standard. And it breeds cynicism. A cynical army will not fight. A cynical army will not die for a flag it believes is being used as a dish rag by politicians. When morale collapses, the military collapses. Mark Kelly is actively destroying morale. He is telling the troops that their oaths are flexible. He is telling them that their leaders are clowns. How do you lead men into fire after telling them that? You can't. Leavitt is fighting to save the soul of the warrior class. She wants a military where honor still means something, where an oath is a blood pact, not a PR statement. The left will tell you this is old news or out of context. That is their favorite defense. It was taken out of context. No, it wasn't. We have the video. We have the transcript. The context was clear. Impede the agenda of the opposing party by any means necessary, including insubordination. The context is actually worse than the soundbite. The context is a concerted effort to render the executive branch impotent whenever a Republican is in charge. It is a soft coup. It is a slow-motion insurrection. And they project their own crimes onto us. They call us insurrectionists for questioning an election, while they actively try to hijack the armed forces. The projection is off the charts. As we approach the halfway mark of this hour, I want you to ask yourself, what would Patton do? What would MacArthur do? If they saw a retired officer inciting this kind of behavior, they would have him stripped of his rank publicly. We have lost that sense of uncompromising standards. We have become soft. We tolerate the intolerable because we are afraid of being called names. Karoline Leavitt isn't afraid. She doesn't care if the New York Times calls her names. She cares about the law. And that courage is contagious. You are seeing other voices start to speak up now. The dam is cracking. In the next segment, we are going to go nuclear. We are going to talk about the specific woke policies that Kelly and his friends have pushed into the military that set the stage for this mutiny. We are going to talk about the drag shows on bases, the CRT training, the purging of Christian chaplains. Because this didn't happen in a vacuum. Kelly's call for disobedience is the cherry on top of a sundae made of pure cultural Marxism. We are going to connect the dots between the indoctrination in the barracks and the insubordination in the Senate. Buckle up. We are peeling back the skin of the onion, and the rot goes all the way to the core. This is the battle for the Pentagon, and we cannot afford to lose it. The rot didn't start with a speech on the Senate floor. Mark Kelly's call for disobedience didn't happen in a vacuum. It is the toxic fruit of a poisonous tree that the Democrats have been watering for the last 4 years. We have to talk about the wokeification of the United States military. This is the elephant in the room that the generals are terrified to discuss, but Karoline Leavitt is dragging it out into the light. When you have a military that prioritizes pronouns over lethality, that prioritizes diversity quotas over meritocracy, you create an environment where discipline is already a joke. Kelly's mutiny is just the logical conclusion of a culture that tells soldiers their feelings matter more than the mission. Let's be brutally honest about what is happening in the barracks. Instead of training to kill the enemy and break their things, our soldiers are being forced to sit through hours of critical race theory indoctrination. They are being told that their white battle buddy is an inherent oppressor, and their black battle buddy is an inherent victim. How in God's name do you build unit cohesion with that garbage? When the bullets start flying, you need to know that the guy next to you has your back, not that he's secretly harboring resentment because of a PowerPoint presentation on white rage mandated by the Pentagon. Mark Kelly has voted for every single budget that funds this indoctrination. He is an accomplice to the psychological dismantling of our troops. Karoline Leavitt sees this clearly. She understands that a military is a blunt instrument designed for one purpose: war. It is not a social experiment. It is not a jobs program for gender studies majors. It is not a backdrop for drag queen story hours. Yes, I said it. We have seen the Navy using a drag queen influencer to try and boost recruitment. A drag queen. In the same Navy that produced Chester Nimitz and the Navy SEALs. It is an insult to the uniform. And where was Captain Mark Kelly when that happened? Did he take to the Senate floor to denounce it? Did he demand an investigation into that? No. He was silent. But the moment he wants to undermine a political opponent, suddenly he finds his voice. The hypocrisy is nauseating. They purge the Christians. They promote the woke. Look at the vaccine mandate. That wasn't about health. Let's stop pretending it was. That was a loyalty test. It was a mechanism to purge the independent thinkers, the religious objectors, and the conservatives from the ranks. Thousands of our best warriors, pilots, special forces, seasoned NCOs, were kicked to the curb like trash because they refused a shot that we now know didn't stop transmission. Mark Kelly stood by and watched it happen. He watched the hollowing out of the officer corps and did nothing. Why? Because the new military they are building doesn't want warriors. It wants compliant automatons who will follow the party line. And now, the chickens are coming home to roost. We are facing the worst recruitment crisis since the end of the draft. The Army is missing its goals by tens of thousands. The Navy can't man its ships. The media tells you it's because of a strong economy or obesity. That is a lie. The young men from rural America, the boys from Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, the backbone of the combat arms, are not signing up. And why should they? Why should a patriotic young man join an organization that calls him a domestic extremist before he even puts on his boots? Why should he serve under leaders like Mark Kelly who think discipline is optional? They have broken the trust with the very demographic that fights our wars. Leavitt's crusade against Kelly is, at its heart, a fight to restore the warrior ethos. She is saying that the military must be apolitical, merit-based, and fiercely disciplined. When Kelly tells troops to disobey, he is spitting on the graves of men who died following orders they didn't like but followed anyway because that is the cost of freedom. You think the guys storming Normandy agreed with every decision FDR made? You think the Marines in Fallujah loved every policy of the Bush administration? It didn't matter. They did their duty. Kelly is teaching a new generation that duty is conditional. Do your duty. Unless you disagree with the politics, then do whatever you want. That is the mindset of a militia, not a professional army. Let's look at the extremism stand-down that Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered. The entire military had to stop training to hunt for extremists in the ranks. They found almost none. Statistically zero. But the message was sent. We are watching you. If you have a Gadsden flag on your truck, if you post Bible verses, you are suspect. It was a witch hunt designed to terrify conservative soldiers into silence. Mark Kelly supported this witch hunt. He is part of the cabal that believes the biggest threat to America is not China, not Russia, not the cartel, but MAGA Republicans. When you view half the country as the enemy, it's easy to justify weaponizing the military against them. This is why Leavitt's voice is so vital. She is articulating what millions of veterans are screaming at their televisions. She is the voice of the old sergeant major who sees the new recruits on their phones during formation and shakes his head. She is the voice of the Gold Star mother who wonders if her son died for a country that actually respects his sacrifice. By targeting Kelly, she is targeting the symbol of this decline. She is saying, "We see you. We see you trading our tradition for trendiness. We see you trading our strength for slogans." And she is demanding a stop to it. The comparison with our adversaries is terrifying. While we are debating inclusive language in our manuals, the Chinese People's Liberation Army is doing live-fire drills around Taiwan. While we are funding gender transition surgeries for soldiers, the Russians are hardening their economy and their troops for a long war. We are becoming a joke on the world stage. Weakness invites aggression. It is a fundamental law of geopolitics. Mark Kelly's rhetoric contributes to that perception of weakness. It shows a fractured command structure. It shows a Senate that is actively sabotaging the executive branch. If I were Xi Jinping, I would look at Mark Kelly and say, "Go ahead, Senator. Keep talking. You are doing my work for me." We need to talk about the brass ceiling. If you are a conservative officer today, good luck getting a star. The promotion boards have been politicized. You have to check the right boxes, say the right buzzwords. If you focus on war fighting and ignore the DEI mandates, your career stalls. If you host a Pride Month potluck, you're on the fast track. This filters out the fighters and promotes the bureaucrats. Mark Kelly is the product of this system, a man who learned to play the political game perfectly. He knows how to signal his virtue to the establishment while betraying the core values of the service. Leavitt is throwing a wrench in that machinery. The liberal media loves to say, Republicans are attacking the military. No, we are attacking the politicization of the military. We love the troops. We love the history. We hate what the left is doing to it. There is a huge difference. We want a military that is so terrifyingly competent that nobody dares to mess with us. They want a military that looks good in a Benetton ad but can't win a war. Mark Kelly is on Team Benetton. Karoline Leavitt is on Team America. That's the divide. It's not about D versus R, it's about survival versus suicide. And let's not forget the sheer arrogance of Kelly telling troops what is legal and illegal. He is not a judge. He is a legislator. But he acts like he is the Supreme Court of morality. He tells them, if an order violates your conscience, you don't have to follow it. That sounds nice in a philosophy class. In a foxhole, it is deadly. Hey Sarge, I know you told me to take that hill, but it violates my conscience because I'm a pacifist today. It opens Pandora's box. Once you allow personal interpretation of orders, the entire structure collapses. Leavitt is reminding everyone that the UCMJ is not a suggestion box. It is a code of laws written in blood. What's next? Unionized soldiers? Strikes during deployment? If we follow Kelly's logic to its end, the military becomes just another government workers' union that can negotiate its terms of service. Sorry, General, we are not deploying to the Middle East until we get better Wi-Fi and more vegan options in the MREs. I know I'm being facetious, but am I? Look at the trajectory. Look at what they are tolerating. Leavitt is drawing a line in the sand and saying, no further. We have to stop the slide before we hit the bottom. This investigation into Kelly is the perfect opportunity to audit the entire culture of the Pentagon. We need to subpoena the training materials. We need to see the emails between the Senate Armed Services Committee and the woke activists in the DOD. We need to expose the network that is pushing this garbage. Leavitt has cracked the door open. We need to kick it down. We need to find out who is really running the show. Is it the generals, or is it the HR consultants? Because right now, it looks like the HR department is in charge of the 82nd Airborne. The soy boy generation of leadership needs to go. We need men of iron. We need leaders who eat nails for breakfast and don't apologize for being American. Mark Kelly presents himself as a tough guy, astronaut, pilot, but his politics are soft. His politics are compliant. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing, or rather, a sheep in wolf's clothing. He wears the costume of a warrior, but he preaches the gospel of the weak. Leavitt is stripping away that costume. She is showing the voters of Arizona and the voters of America that their hero is actually a Trojan horse for the very ideology that is destroying their country. And don't think for a second that this doesn't affect you if you're a civilian. A weak military means a dangerous world. It means higher gas prices because shipping lanes aren't safe. It means more terrorism because bad guys aren't afraid. It means the dollar loses its status because we can't back it up with force. The military is the shield that allows us to live our comfortable lives. Mark Kelly is drilling holes in that shield. Karoline Leavitt is trying to patch them. It is that serious. This isn't just about Senate procedure. It's about whether your children will grow up in a free country or a vassal state. So when Leavitt calls for a formal reprimand, she is actually being merciful. In the old days, treason and sedition carried a much heavier price. She is giving him a chance to be shamed into silence. But knowing the arrogance of the left, he won't be silent. He will double down. He will go on MSNBC and cry victim. He will say he is fighting for democracy by destroying the military. And that is why we must be louder. We must amplify Leavitt's message until it drowns out their lies. We must share the videos, read the transcripts, and refuse to let them rewrite the rules of engagement. In the final stretch of our hour together, we are going to look at the what-if scenarios. What happens if this goes unchecked? What does a US civil war look like if the military fractures? I don't want to scare you, but we have to look into the abyss to know why we must avoid it. We are going to play out the war games that the Pentagon refuses to run. We are going to see the nightmare scenario that Mark Kelly is inviting into our homes. Stay with me. The most terrifying part is yet to come, but so is the solution. We can fix this, but only if we face the brutal reality first. We are standing on the precipice. I promised you we would look into the abyss, and here it is. What happens if Karoline Leavitt fails? What happens if Mark Kelly's doctrine of principled insubordination becomes the new standard operating procedure for the United States military? It isn't a theoretical exercise anymore. It is a forecast. If a senator can tell troops to disobey orders based on political disagreement and face no consequences, we cease to be a constitutional republic. We become a fractured state where power grows from the barrel of a gun, and that gun is held by whoever shouts the loudest about social justice. Imagine this scenario. It's January 2025 or 2029. A Republican president, maybe Donald Trump, maybe someone like him, is sworn in. He gives a lawful order to the military to secure the southern border. He orders the deployment of troops to stop the invasion of fentanyl and cartels. But the commanding general of the operation, a man who grew up on Mark Kelly's rhetoric, decides that the order is immoral. He decides that migration is a human right. So, he refuses. He cites the Kelly precedent. He goes on CNN and says, "I cannot in good conscience follow this order." The media calls him a hero. The Democrats in Congress cheer. And just like that, the executive branch is paralyzed. The border remains open. The will of the voters is nullified by a guy with stars on his shoulder who thinks he knows better. That is not a democracy. That is a military junta with a PR department. That is what happens in Turkey. That is what happens in Myanmar. It has never happened here because we had a sacred line that separated the military from politics. Mark Kelly just erased that line. He took a giant eraser to 2 centuries of tradition. By encouraging resistance against a potential Republican administration, he is laying the groundwork for a soft coup. He is telling the deep state actors within the DOD, you are the firewall. You don't have to listen to the voters. You only have to listen to the party. It is chilling. It is the end of America as we know it. Now, take it a step further. Imagine domestic unrest. Imagine the government decides to crack down on free speech or gun ownership. If the military is loyal to the Constitution, they would refuse unlawful orders to disarm American citizens. But if the military has been purged of patriots and filled with political operatives who follow the Kelly Doctrine, what stops them? If they believe that MAGA is a domestic terrorist threat because their training told them so and their senators told them so, will they hesitate to turn their weapons on their own people? This is the nightmare. This is why the founders were so paranoid about standing armies. They knew that if the army became a tool of a political faction, liberty was dead. Karoline Leavitt is the Paul Revere of this generation, shouting that the redcoats are not coming. They are already running the Pentagon. This is why we cannot treat this as just another new cycle. This is the hill to die on. If we lose the neutrality of the military, we lose everything. We lose the ability to have fair elections because the threat of force will always hang over the result. Vote for us, or the military will step in. It sounds crazy, right? But look at the rhetoric. They are already calling their opponents Hitler. If you truly believe your opponent is Hitler, you justify any action to stop him, including mutiny. Mark Kelly is providing the moral permission slip for that tyranny. But here is the good news. Yes, there is good news. The good news is that they overplayed their hand. By sending Mark Kelly out there to say the quiet part out loud, they woke up the sleeping giant. They thought we wouldn't notice. They thought we were too distracted by inflation and gas prices to care about the UCMJ. But Karoline Leavitt proved them wrong. Her tenacity has sparked a firestorm. Veterans are organizing. Military families are speaking out. The mask is off, and we see the beast for what it is. Now, we have to fight back. And we don't fight with violence. We fight with the relentless application of the law and the ballot box. So, what is the solution? How do we fix this broken system? First, we need to rally behind Karoline Leavitt. She needs to know that she is not alone. Every time the media attacks her, we need to amplify her voice. We need to share the clips of her exposing Kelly. We need to make her a household name, not because of who she is, but because of what she represents, unapologetic truth. She is showing the GOP establishment how to fight. You don't apologize. You don't back down. You double down. You hit them with the facts until they break. Second, we need a total purge of the Pentagon leadership. When the next Republican president takes office, he cannot play nice with the generals who pushed this woke agenda. He needs to do what Lincoln did, fire the incompetent and the disloyal, and find the Grants and Shermans who just want to win wars. Every general who stayed silent while Kelly incited mutiny should be retired. Every admiral who prioritized diversity over readiness should be shown the door. We need to clean house. We need to install leadership that respects the chain of command and fears the Constitution more than they fear the New York Times editorial board. Third, we need to make the UCMJ enforceable again. If Mark Kelly is not reprimanded, then the next Congress must convene hearings and strip him of his privileges. If the military won't police its own, the civilian oversight must step in. We need to cut the funding for these woke programs. Not a single taxpayer dollar should go to drag shows, gender studies, or extremism training that targets conservatives. Use the power of the purse. Starve the beast. If the Pentagon wants money for missiles, they get it. If they want money for indoctrination, they get zero. It's time for the Republicans in Congress to grow a spine and use their leverage. We also need to engage in a cultural counteroffensive. We need to tell our sons and daughters that military service is noble, but only if the military is worthy of them. We need to encourage young patriots to join up, not to conform, but to take it back. We need a new generation of officers who are constitutionalists. We can't abandon the institution to the left. If we walk away, they win by default. We need to infiltrate the system with sanity. We need lieutenants and captains who know the UCMJ better than their superiors and who aren't afraid to use it to protect their troops from political abuse. Karoline Leavitt has given us the blueprint. It's called offense. For too long, Republicans have been playing defense. We react to their narratives. We apologize for our values. Leavitt went on offense. She accused them of the crime. She framed the narrative. She put them on trial. This is the energy we need going into the next election. We are not the radicals. We are the normies. We are the ones who want a military that follows orders. They are the radicals who want a military that mutinies. We need to hammer that message home every single day. Mark Kelly will go down in history, but not as the hero he thinks he is. He will be remembered as the man who sold his honor for a seat at the table of a corrupt regime. He will be the cautionary tale of what happens when ambition eats integrity. But Karoline Leavitt? She is just getting started. She represents the future of the America First movement. Sharp, articulate, fearless, and armed with the facts. She is the nightmare of the DC establishment because she cannot be bought and she cannot be bullied. As we wrap up this hour, I want to leave you with a thought about loyalty. The military is built on loyalty. Loyalty to the unit, loyalty to the country, loyalty to the Constitution. The left demands loyalty to the party. That is the fundamental difference. Mark Kelly chose the party. He betrayed the Constitution. We must choose the Constitution. We must remain loyal to the idea of America, even when the government is trying to destroy it. We keep the flame alive by refusing to accept their lies, by refusing to accept their new normal. We know what a mutiny looks like. We saw it in the transcripts. We know what treason smells like. We smell it in the Senate chamber. And we know what courage looks like. We see it in Karoline Leavitt standing alone against the storm. The question is, will you stand with her? Will you demand accountability? Or will you let the greatest military in the history of the world dissolve into a pathetic, politicized social club? The choice is yours. But remember this, weakness is a provocation. If we don't fix this, the wolves are waiting. The world is a dangerous place, and we are dismantling our own armor. It is time to wake up. It is time to support the fighters. It is time to demand that Mark Kelly faces the music. The trial of the century isn't happening in a courtroom. It's happening in the court of public opinion, and you are the jury. You have seen the evidence. You have heard the arguments. You know the stakes. Now, go out there and render your verdict. Make your voices heard. Call your representatives. Share the truth. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. This is the battle for our survival, and we intend to win. Thank you for watching. Keep your powder dry, keep your eyes open, and never, ever apologize for loving this country.